And hello there, everybody. I'm First Alert Meteorologist Cutter Martin here to give you an update on what is now Tropical Storm Idalia. Was Tropical Depression 10, so not a separate storm, simply an upgrade of the same storm, and that's because the National Hurricane Center has sent Hurricane Reconnaissance, a team out in the hurricane hunters, basically, more commonly known as the hurricane hunters, out in a big old plane with lots of measurement tools, and they have found sustained winds 39 miles per hour or greater. They're officially listing it as sustained winds of 40 miles an hour there with tropical storm now. Idalia. I will say, though, it's still getting its act together. It is not the most organized storm, but certainly not the least either. And structurally, it is starting to look just a little bit more organized, well to our south, more than 1,000 miles, probably just more than 1,000 miles to the south of Atlanta. Nowhere near our backyard just yet, but it is going to be something to watch if you, especially if you have friends, family, loved ones, plans, business trips to the state of Florida this work week, especially Wednesday and earlier than Wednesday, prior to Wednesday, this work week. And then, of course, can't totally rule out some impacts at coastal Georgia. That is certainly a definite possibility, though still, even for coastal Georgia, it's not a sure bet to what magnitude those impacts will be. And then even here in North Georgia, Metro Atlanta, we're going to be watching it pretty closely, certainly helping to pump up some moisture our way as a front approaches, hence the increasing chance of rain and thunder Monday, Tuesday. But first alert on Wednesday as well. We're just needing to keep a casual eye on the forecast, and especially on Wednesday, if we do see any impact from Idalia, it would probably be midweek, Wednesday into Wednesday night, perhaps wrapping up early Thursday morning, and then quickly scooting on out of here. Now, that's not necessarily the most likely scenario, but we're watching it, the First Alert Weather Team, so all we are doing is asking you to follow along and keep a casual eye on that forecast. Nothing to cancel plans over yet, nothing to worry about just yet, but certainly something kind of the highlight of the forecast all across the Southeast, and something many meteorologists, even outside of the city of Atlanta, North Georgia, will be watching pretty closely. So let's go ahead and take you to the satellite and radar view right now. This is Idalia. Again, may not look too impressive there, sitting in the far northwestern Caribbean Sea, kind of the Yucatan Channel area, the area of low pressure, area of lowest pressure, kind of the center of this system to the south and east of Cancun, and had been shifting off to the south ever so gradually the past couple of days. And with the most recent update beginning to move on to the north, but very, very slowly. It's basically meandering across the northwestern Caribbean as it was forecast to do so. So no huge surprises just yet, but it's this stage in the storm's life cycle that tend to be very crucial in determining that long-term forecast. So that's the structure of the storm right now. In fact, I'll pause it, and we're letting people join this feed in the moment. I sent a push alert asking folks to join in the First Alert weather app. We're streaming also at atlantanewsfirst.com, Roku, Amazon Fire, the Atlanta News First app, any streaming platform. Basically, we're having a weather chat right now. So kind of taking it slow off the top here, letting folks join before we get into the nitty-gritty forecast. And a reminder, if you have any weather questions, comments, concerns, YouTube is the place to be. And to address any concerns that you may have, especially for North Georgia residents, City of Atlanta folks. Ask any weather questions if you need a clarification. Just beyond the screen here, adjacent to the microphone, which you do see streaming at home, we have another computer. We're watching a YouTube feed, and Steve already is commenting in. Steve is the avatar name there, talking about Mother Nature and some of the craziness that happens in nature. And yeah, it's a sign of the season. It's summer, almost the peak of hurricane season within the next week and a half or so. So it's not unusual that we do have a system to track, and this one is threatening to impact some of our Gulf Coast states and portions of the Southeast as we get into the work week. So again, let's talk structure of this storm. It is breathing, so to speak. I've heard that term used, and I think that that's a decent way to describe this. I'm going to draw it out for you. Notice those wispy clouds kind of fanning out in all directions, indicating that wind shear not too bad. Now, I think there's a little bit of northerly shear on the system at the moment. Notice how clouds are fanning out this way just a little bit, but they're really fanning out to the south and to the southwest. So certainly the system is rotating very, very well. And we're going to be watching how this system looks structurally over the next 24 to 36 hours. And as it begins to organize, I think the next 24 to 36 hours will be especially crucial, because sometimes what tends to happen is thunderstorms will really develop in very heavy and concentrated pockets at this stage in the system's life cycle, kind of in a disorganized fashion. And sometimes when that happens, that can move the center around just a little bit. And of course, if the center moves around, it may seem like a small change now. 100 miles in the grand scheme of things may not seem like a big change, but for example, let's say that center reforms just about 100 miles to the south and east. That could have an impact on that long-term track and how the approaching trough that's going to lift this northward, what kind of hold it has on Idalia. So again, something to watch pretty closely. How does this system organize over the next couple of days? We're going to be watching it pretty closely as well. Brian in Tampa saying, hate to say this, but here in Tampa, we are due. We have dodged so many hurricanes. Obviously, Ian was initially forecast to, I'm sure you remember this, Brian, to forecast to more directly impact Tampa. Ended up taking a sharper turn to the south and east, impacting the Fort Myers, Naples, Port Charlotte, those areas, Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel Island, and then going back to 2004, Charlie took a sharper right turn and impacted again the Fort Myers, Punta Gorda, Port Charlotte area just north of Fort Myers and north of Maples, and yeah, Brian, Irma as well, impacting that area and taking a slightly sharper turn and going inland before the worst of the weather reached Tampa Bay and St. Petersburg. So it's still very early in the game. Worth a watch all across the west and northwest coasts of Florida, southwest Florida as well, because there is still uncertainty in the forecast. And as Brian mentioned, forecasts can change, and there probably will be some alterations to the forecast. Here's the latest cone from the National Hurricane Center. Forecast to be a strong tropical storm by Tuesday morning to the northwest, kind of west-northwest of Havana, Cuba. And then forecast to be somewhere off the west in the Gulf Coast of Florida, maybe due west of Fort Myers or so, Tuesday afternoon. And forecast to make landfall at the moment between Tampa Bay, St. Petersburg, and the city of Tampa, on up towards maybe as far west as Panama City. Now, keep in mind, this is a cone, and it is a few days out. Forecasts continue to improve, and they get more and more accurate, and confidence is greater at a more extended period of time away from landfall, more than it ever has been in the past. But weather is weather, Mother Nature is Mother Nature, and there will always be uncertainty when you are days out. Keep in mind, today's Sunday. This is not forecast to make landfall until Wednesday. Now, of course, if it did take a sharper turn to the north and east, it would make landfall a little bit sooner, perhaps Tuesday. Still, 48, 72 hours out, there is uncertainty in that forecast. And also keep in mind the cone of uncertainty, that white shaded area, just a range of possibilities where the center of the storm would be. We know by this point, after the past few hurricane seasons that we've had of late, that impacts extend well beyond the center of circulation and many times well outside of the cone of uncertainty. So do keep that in mind. And if the system, for those watching and streaming from North Georgia, I know we have an audience across the nation on YouTube right now, and probably others on Roku, Amazon Fire, AtlantaNewsFirst.com, First Alert Weather app, which is a great tool to have this week, because not only do we do live videos, but also you can get updated forecasts sent straight to your phone. It's a work week, you're busy, you're on the go, students back in school, it is the school year. And it's hard to kind of stay tuned to the forecast and to maybe devote 5-10 minutes a day to watching the forecast, sitting on the couch in front of your TV. But hey, we're meeting you in the middle, and we'll always be there to give you the forecast, whether it's calm weather or severe weather, or we're just watching the tropics like we are right now. We'll do that by giving you updates across digital streaming platforms and anytime in the First Alert Weather app. And this is a good week to keep an eye on the First Alert Weather app. And just in case, North Georgia and Atlanta, we're going to keep an eye on this for you, because if it does make landfall in the Big Bend of Florida, specifically, and I'm going to draw on the map a little bit, let's say it takes a little bit more of a western track here and does impact maybe more the panhandle of Florida in this area, keep in mind that impacts extend well to the north and to the east and possibly northwest as well of the center of circulation. So there is room for rain and some wind, though not a big wind risk, of course, further inland, but some room for some of that wind to work its way further inland, and more significantly, though, the rain risk and risk of isolated tornadoes. If it were to make landfall, in this western portion of the cone, impacts would extend possibly into portions of North Georgia and the Midlands of South Carolina and on up into North Carolina. That would be something that we would need to keep an eye out for. Keep in mind, though, other end of the spectrum, if it were to make landfall more to the south and east, maybe even taking a very sharp turn into southwest Florida. You may not be in the cone now, but worth paying attention to if you're watching from areas even south of Tampa. Where days out here in that cone can certainly shift. As I said a moment ago, forecast confidence is greater at a greater lead time than it ever has been in the past, but that doesn't mean it's always perfect and it's always a perfect forecast several days out. And we just got a new update, it looks like, from the National Hurricane Center right here, 4:50. It came in early. It was, typically it's in at 5 p.m. It doesn't usually get into our system until 5, maybe 05 p.m., but we did just get that update. That's why you saw that cone shrink live here on this live stream. So not too many changes. Unfortunately, something it did, when we get an update, sometimes these timestamps can jostle a little bit, but keep in mind, the only big change I'm seeing is that they are now officially calling for a Category 2 to make landfall again between Tampa and Panama City or so, and then taking a sharper turn off to the north and northeast, perhaps that center of circulation, moving through the coastal empire of Georgia, South Georgia, and then brushing the southeastern seaboard as a tropical storm before forecast to head out to sea. Now, again, there is still uncertainty here. We're going to reiterate some of the same things we were just talking about. If this takes a more western track and solution, that would spread impacts deeper into middle and north Georgia. If this were to take a sharper turn to the south and east, it would keep the majority of the impacts basically along and south of the I-10 corridor. So there is a lot still to talk about here, a lot still to be aware of. And it does look like we have a few comments coming in on YouTube, some other streamers coming in as well. Maybe you're watching on the Atlanta News First app or the First Alert Weather app, and you're navigating over to Facebook or rather YouTube to ask your weather questions. So I'm just going to spend a couple minutes. Again, if you have any weather questions about the new track, if you have loved ones and you're just wondering what their part of Florida is going to be most at risk for over the next few days, just give me a holler. Atlanta News First on YouTube. That's the account to like and the account to follow and the account I'm watching in this live stream to answer questions from. Again, we're tracking First Alert Tropical Storm Idalia. More likely to see impacts remain south of Atlanta and south of North Georgia, but there is still enough uncertainty in the forecast to where we are keeping an eye on it, and all we are doing by adding that First Alert to Wednesday's forecast is asking you to follow along until we can 100% say that all impacts will remain south of North Georgia. Again, still not a likely solution that we're seeing severe weather in North Georgia, but we can't completely 100% take that off the table, so something we're going to be watching pretty closely. Rico, hello to you. Hockey87 saying, agree, Brian, price you pay for living in Florida, and, hockey in any part of the country has weather hazards. Southern California just had flooding from the remnants of a tropical system, earthquakes, tornadoes, blizzards. Everyone has something. It's just the world we live in, the world we live on, and nature is nature. And a lot of times, for example, hurricanes are nature's way to balance things out. The heat of the tropics, the cold of the poles, trying to keep things neutral and in homeostasis. It is nature at its finest. It's just about how we prepare for it and how we attempt to minimize damage from these systems. Brian in Tampa, thanks for answering questions. Yeah, you're very welcome, Brian. And Brian saying we deal with storm surge a lot. Yeah, Tampa Bay especially prone to storm surge. In fact, let's pull that graphic back up. I'm going to back the map up a little bit so that you can see more clearly. And again, if you are just now tuning in, 4:53 is your time. Just got an update from the National Hurricane Center. That 5 o'clock advisory came out actually a few minutes early, which doesn't happen too often, and it got into our system very quickly. So you see now officially calling for a Category 2 with sustained winds of 100 miles an hour. And that's before landfall. Of course, the exact point of that forecast, that's Wednesday, 2 a.m. It's still not on land and still possibly could be strengthening right up into landfall. So worth a close watch, especially if you're in Florida and if you're in coastal Georgia. The coastal empire is what they call it, the low country of South Carolina. And Brian, if you're in Tampa, again, there is uncertainty here. Possibly could this go a little bit outside of the cone or follow the eastern edge of this cone? It certainly is possible. Could it go just a little bit west of the cone or follow this cone off to the north? That certainly too is possible. Could it veer just a little bit further east? Could it have a looser north turn and northeast turn and veer a little to the west? You know, we can't bet our careers and our jobs days out that we can't have these subtle fluctuations that have bigger impacts on local neighborhoods. But right now, Panama City, more so through Cedar Key, Apalachicola, the Big Bend of Florida, which is right here, on down to the Tampa and St. Pete metro area, kind of the area of most likely center impact or landfall. And on this heading, that would not be good news for Tampa. That would mean a generally, you know, initially an offshore wind, but as the system makes its closest pass to Florida, central Florida and the central Gulf Coast there, kind of to the west of the bay, then we would see winds turn off onshore and kind of really blow hard out of the south and west, and that would drive storm surge up into Tampa, St. Pete, and Tampa Bay, and really much of the already, you know, very fragile after Ian southwest coast of Florida. But keep in mind, we don't want to read into this as set in stone just yet. Uncertainty is likely to remain over the next 24 to 48 hours. And keep in mind, for those in North Georgia, Metro Atlanta, this system on its most likely forecast and most likely heading would remain the center of the worst weather to our south and to our southeast. Now, interesting note here, and what is a little bit unusual about this particular setup, part of the reason why it's lifting northward, we have a little cool front, little dip in the jet stream and trough of low pressure approaching that's going to help lift it north and then help push it off to the north and to the east. So the timing of this trough or this cool front, which you probably been hearing us talk about for days now, on WANF, Peachtree TV, AtlantaNewsFirst.com, and then the First Alert Weather app. The timing will be crucial, as well as the structure of the storm and what happens over the next 24 hours with the storm. So kind of a two-parter here. Watching the structure of the system, how it really evolves and spins up, so to speak, over the next 24 to 36 hours. Its own structure, of course, will impact its day 3, day 4, day 5 track, but also what is happening in the environment around it. That's also going to be crucially important. And it's a complicated environment right now. Let's go back to the maps here. Again, we have Idalia and the northwestern Caribbean. Lots of spin there, a little bit of northerly shear. We also have Category 2 Hurricane Franklin that is spinning across the southwestern Atlantic, north and east of the Bahamas, north of the Turks and Caicos, relatively harmlessly out there. Still, though, we're tracking two tropical systems, not too far apart from each other. And then here comes that trough, that dip in the jet stream, so to speak. Again, there it is. See the showers and thunderstorms starting to fire up to our north and west, also across the state of Texas, where they so desperately need rain. It is that same dip in the jet stream, that same cool front that's going to help lift Idalia off to the north and eventually turn it off to the north and east. But the rate at which it turns, how sharp of a northeast turn it makes, how long it takes to lift into the Gulf of Mexico and get caught up in that dip in the jet stream, that approaching cool front that hopefully will bring us some nicer weather, that'll be crucial in determining its exact track going forward. So there is still quite a bit of uncertainty in the first alert forecast, but I want to bring that cone up one more time and talk about the setup, and hopefully with talking about that turn and what's causing it, that makes a little more sense now as to why you're seeing the cone lift northward and then that sharp turn off to the north and east. So here's Idalia now, relatively harmless, though it is producing heavy rain across portions of Cuba, the Cayman Island, and portions of the Yucatan Peninsula, Cozumel, Puerto Vallarta, those areas. Heavy rain, yes, but wind and the worst of the weather is actually offshore right now. And then forecast to lift northward and strengthen, becoming now on this new forecast track a Category 1 hurricane by Monday night, so tomorrow night into Tuesday morning. A strengthening Category 1 hurricane Tuesday afternoon, and then forecast on its present heading, though there will probably be further adjustments, forecast to make landfall late Tuesday night, early Wednesday morning. Most likely bet is between Panama City, Florida, and the Tampa, St. Pete area, kind of around the Big Bend, Cedar Key, Apalachicola, on eastward areas of the state of Florida, and then crossing the I-10 corridor somewhere between Tallahassee and Jacksonville, and then moving up into the Georgia Coastal Empire, perhaps as far west as Macon, or remaining offshore if it takes a sharper turn, could remain south of Jacksonville, and then paralleling the southeast coast, and then likely heading out to sea and kind of getting torn apart by another approaching trough and some wind shear in the area. Now, this is a cone of uncertainty, and there is a reason that it is called that. That is just a forecast for where the center of circulation will go, and we all know that impacts from tropical systems extend well beyond where the center is. Sometimes some of the worst weather in some systems can be away from the center, though in an organized hurricane, of course, the strongest winds tend to be around the eye wall and the center of circulation, but that doesn't mean that impacts are confined to a small area. This system could be on the rather, medium to large size as it moves through the Gulf of Mexico with a large shield of rain and perhaps a risk of severe weather like tornadoes, extending well beyond that cone of uncertainty. So do keep that in mind. City of Atlanta, not in the forecast cone. None of our North Georgia counties are currently in the forecast cone, but if it does take that more westward solution towards Panama City and Macon, there probably would be some inclement weather, especially along and south and east of the I-85 corridor. So something to casually watch here over the next few days, now through Wednesday into Thursday. Weather headlines for you. We do have some weather to talk about as well. Going deeper into the work week, we begin today. It was hot, high temperatures in the mid to upper 90s. It felt hotter than 105 in spots. We have a first alert Monday because, yes, we have showers and thunderstorms bubbling up today, but I think more so in the way of rain and thunder tomorrow. And then first alert Wednesday because we do need to keep a closer than normal watch on a tropical storm, now Tropical Storm Idalia, and the northwestern Caribbean as it becomes a hurricane and is forecast to move through the eastern Gulf of Mexico and make a landfall along the Florida Peninsula as we get into late Tuesday, early Wednesday. That is the present forecast, and there is enough uncertainty in the forecast that it's worth keeping an eye on. Don't go canceling your midweek plans. Don't get worried in North Georgia about severe weather, but it certainly is worth some attention. And until we can refine that forecast enough to completely remove the possibility of some severe weather off the table here in North Georgia Metro Atlanta, it is worth keeping a closer eye on that forecast. The team will keep you updated at AtlantaNewsFirst.com on TV, WANF, Peachtree TV, WPCH. We're scheduled to have a 6:30 newscast this evening, though may get covered up by golf, so did want to make sure we stream the latest and greatest information. We'll still keep you updated at AtlantaNewsFirst.com and the First Alert Weather app. Also going to talk more about it tonight, 9 p.m. We're back on Peachtree TV. We have a 10 o'clock hour. We'll get another new track as we head into the 11 o'clock half hour back on Atlanta News First, WANF. Full forecast coming your way later this evening again. Just wanted to check in, chat, and we'll check YouTube one more time. Doesn't look like we have too many questions coming in at the moment. Steve, Brian, Rico, Hockey87, that's the avatar on YouTube. Thank you for tuning in and for watching. A reminder, you can always reach out to me, any meteorologist on the First Alert Weather team, Ella Dorsey, Rodney Harris, Fred Campagna, Patrick Pete, First Alert Chief Meteorologist Jennifer Valdez, Courtney Jacobazzi, all here to keep you updated. We'll answer your questions on social media as well. Back live streaming, again, another digital chat at 8 p.m., and then we'll see you on TV at 9. Have a wonderful evening. Dodge the storms out there, and keep an eye on that midweek forecast.